The phone call lasted 43 seconds. Brian counted every one of them. "Dad, don't come. My daughter-in-law says it's too complicated," his son Michael said, voice tight and apologetic. Those 12 words hit Brian like a physical blow. He stood in his garage, holding the phone to his ear, staring at the half-finished rocking horse he'd been carving for his granddaughter, a granddaughter he'd never met. 3 years later, Brian would understand that rejection in a way that transformed him completely. But in that moment, all he felt was the sting of being unwanted. Brian's daughter-in-law Jessica had always been polite. That was the strange part. She wasn't cruel or openly hostile. She was just distant. When Michael first brought her home 7 years ago, Brian thought she was shy. When she began diplomatically deflecting every invitation to family gatherings, Brian convinced himself she was an introvert. When she asked Michael not to visit his parents for Christmas that first year, Brian told himself it was about creating new traditions. But that phone call in September made everything clear. Michael had gotten married at City Hall without telling his parents. They learned about it through Facebook. The pregnancy announcement came next, also social media, not a phone call. And when the baby was born, the photos went online before the grandparents got a single explanation. "She just needs time," Michael kept saying. "Her family is complicated. She has trust issues. This has nothing to do with you, Dad." But it was about Brian. It had to be, because Brian represented the past that Jessica wanted Michael to escape. Brian was a contractor, self-made, blue-collar, someone who'd worked with his hands his entire life. Brian had raised Michael in a modest home, worked overtime to put him through college, and watched him become something more. Michael had become a lawyer, an important man, someone polished and educated. Someone who fit into Jessica's world. For 2 years, Brian tried everything. He sent gifts that were politely acknowledged but never used. He wrote letters that went unanswered. He even drove 3 hours to the hospital when his granddaughter was born and sat in the waiting room for 6 hours before Michael came out, looking uncomfortable and guilty. "You can't be here, Dad. Jessica's family is in there." Those 7 words became a refrain in Brian's mind. By the 3rd year, Brian had stopped trying. He threw himself into his work, taking on bigger projects, staying late at the job site. His wife, Carol, worried constantly. She'd catch him staring at his phone, hoping for a message that never came. She'd find him in the garage, building things he'd never use, a dollhouse so intricate it should have been in a museum, toys carved from walnut and cherry, a tiny bed with hand-stitched bedding. "You're punishing yourself," Carol said one evening, watching him sand a miniature dresser. "That's not going to change anything." "I'm not punishing myself," Brian replied quietly. "I'm just remembering what it felt like to want to build something." The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Brian was at a job site in the city, a beautiful renovation of a historic home owned by a young family. As he worked on the crown molding, he overheard the homeowner's daughter talking to her mother about her grandfather. The girl, no more than 4, was explaining how her grandfather taught her to paint. "He lets me help even though I make it messy," the child said. "He says messy is how you learn." Something cracked open in Brian's chest. That evening, he didn't go to the garage. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with Carol and made a decision. He was going to write Michael a letter, not an angry letter, not a guilt-inducing letter, but the truth. "Michael, I won't ask you to come see me. I won't send more gifts. I won't try to force my way into your life anymore, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually read this instead of deleting it. 3 years ago, when you told me not to come, I decided I was the problem. I told myself I wasn't good enough, that I was too blue-collar, too simple, too much of a reminder of where you came from. I convinced myself that Jessica was protecting you from something you'd outgrown. But I was wrong about what I was grieving. I wasn't grieving the rejection. I was grieving the lost opportunity to show my granddaughter something that has nothing to do with education or status or the right neighborhood. I wanted to show her that you can build something with your hands and have it matter, that mistakes are just part of the process, that there's dignity in work, in effort, in showing up. I wanted to show her her father, because you learned that from me, Michael. You think you left it behind, but you didn't. I see it in your work. You build cases the way I build houses. You construct arguments with precision and care. You care about the foundation and the details. That came from me. Jessica's fear, and I know now that's what this is, comes from something in her own story, and I get that now. I get that protecting your family sometimes means drawing lines, even if it hurts. But I'm asking you to consider something. What if you stopped choosing between your past and your future? What if your daughter could know both? What if she could have a mother who came from a complicated family and a grandfather who knows how to build something with nothing? I'm not asking you to convince Jessica anything. I'm not asking you to fight. I'm just asking you to think about what you're teaching your daughter when you erase half of who you are. I'll be here when you're ready. No pressure, no guilt, just here. Dad. Brian didn't expect a response. He put the letter in the mail and returned to his routine, trying not to check his phone every 5 minutes. The response came 4 weeks later, not a phone call, a letter, Michael's handwriting on an envelope addressed to his father. Dad, I've read your letter about 200 times. I've drafted responses in my head 1,000 times. This is what I finally have the courage to write. You're right, I was choosing, and I was teaching Emma. Our daughter's name is Emma, by the way. I know you didn't even know that. I was teaching her that some parts of her are shameful. Jessica has agreed to come with me to therapy. We are working through her family issues and my need to please her by erasing my own family. It's not going to fix everything overnight. She's still scared, but she's willing to try. Would you want to meet Emma just once? No pressure, I understand if you're too hurt. I'm sorry it took me this long. Michael. Emma was 6 now, and she was teaching her mother how to paint. Brian sat in Michael and Jessica's living room, a room he'd been invited into, watching his granddaughter cover a canvas in wild, beautiful strokes of purple and gold. Jessica sat across the room, sketching quietly, a tentative smile on her face. Michael stood beside Brian, watching their daughter work. She has your focus, Brian said softly. And your stubbornness, Michael replied. Then he added, thank you, Dad, for not giving up. I did give up, Brian said honestly. For a while I gave up. But you came back. Brian thought about all those hours in the garage, all those things he'd built that no one had seen. He thought about the letter he almost didn't send, and how close he'd come to losing his daughter-in-law's chance at healing, his son's chance at wholeness, and his granddaughter's chance to know the complete version of her father. I couldn't stay away, Brian said. Not really. You're my son, and she's my granddaughter. Some things are stronger than hurt. Emma looked up from her painting, covered in color, completely unself-conscious about the mess she was making. Grandpa Brian, do you want to paint with me? She asked, her 6-year-old voice carrying an invitation that felt like forgiveness for everyone in the room. I'd love to, Em, he said, standing up to join her. As he picked up a brush, he caught Jessica's eye. She nodded slightly, a gesture of acceptance that carried the weight of everything unsaid and finally understood. Some bridges take time to build. Some require patience, vulnerability, and the willingness to lay down your weapons before the other person is ready to lay down theirs. But once they're built, once you can finally cross them and stand on the other side with the people you love, you understand that the wait was worth it. Every single second of it.